Hello and welcome to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. James and I have a lot to talk about this week. And remember, we take your questions each episode, so write into politicswarroom@gmail.com or send a tweet to @Politicon for next week's show. We'll get to as many as we can, and don't forget to tell us where you're from. Also, please check out the link to this week's sponsors, Magic Spoon, in the show notes. You know how much we love Magic Spoon. We thank you for supporting our sponsors. It helps make this podcast happen. Please tell your friends about us and remind them to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcast. Hey, James, the legislative process is never very pretty, but this is uglier than most right now, what's going on up in the Senate and the House. I'm writing about this for The Hill, and several points are striking. By the way, I still give it a 52-48 chance of success, but that's 48% chance of failure, which would be catastrophic for Democrats. But one, the lessons for the Democrats. The left-wingers in the House have to take a remedial course in math. I'm sorry, they don't have the votes for what they really want. A naive Washington Post column said they really outsmarted Pelosi by withholding votes. Well, you only outsmart someone if you get a result you want, and they're not going to get the big result they want. I hate the fact that we talk about this in numbers rather than policies, but they're not going to get 3.5 or whatever have you. Two, there's a small handful of House Democrats, self-described moderates, who are in the tank to the drug companies and opposing allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices. We pay 2.5 times more for drug prices in this country than they do in most other places. And these aren't moderates. These Democrats aren't moderates to the millions of seniors and others who pay such an exorbitant price for essential drugs they need. Just negotiating drug prices for Medicare is a very reasonable position. And finally, I think Joe Manchin, from a very conservative state, has tried to deal with leaders usually very, privately, but I think he really wants to make things happen. By contrast, Arizona's Kristen Sinema, she wants attention. She wants to be seen as a John McCain. The difference, Senator, is John McCain had real beliefs, and this led him to supposed maverick positions. The only reason this is going to work in the end, I think, James, is going to primarily be due to Nancy Pelosi and the fact that Democrats are going to realize, whatever their objections, failure is an absolute cataclysm for them.
Well, yes, a couple points here, and the last point is the most important. It's Benjamin Franklin. I've said it 100 times during this. We best hang together, surely we'll hang separately.
Right.
And just everybody has jogging position, but I think you and I agree on this pretty strongly, is that it all became about a number. Bernie throws $6 million out. Then the White House throws $3.5 million out. Then Senator Manchin throws $1.5 million out. And if you spent more time talking about what's in it and less time talking, and by the way, this is over 10 years, which most people don't realize. So it's really $350 billion a year.
And also includes some tax cuts.
Right. So now they have sort of lost that narrative. And hopefully, if or when they get the deal, I hope they accentuate what's in it. What's in it? What is it going to do for people? People don't care or understand about the other stuff. But I think if they don't pass this, they are 100% screwed. 100. All right? And there's a lot of really, I'm going to take a minute or two to address this. There's a lot of really depressed Democrats, and they come up, and I saw a bunch of them in New York at a fundraiser for Terry McAuliffe on the Upper West Side. It was a very democratic, very affluent crowd, as you can imagine. And to a person, they got to do something, James. Go tell them, goddamn, it's horrible. It is not unreasonable to assume that the virus is getting better. It is getting better for now. They have this really promising therapeutic coming online. And there's good reason to believe this is going to be a manageable situation here in the next couple of months. literally, I say everybody. I hate to say everybody because somebody say this guy didn't say it, but overwhelming number of people who know anything about the economy think that it's getting ready to explode, that there's pent-up demand, there's household savings. I mean, the only problem going to have is just these supply chain issues. And the third is Trump's going to get indicted by the Manhattan DA. And it's going to be a pretty conclusive, strong indictment that's going to cause great discomfort. So everything hinges on, and if those things happen, then you got a chance. But it all hinges on them passing something so you can legitimately go on television or you can write a column saying that the Biden economic plan gave people confidence to go out and spend money and gave business confidence to go out and hire more, blah, 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 blah. It's all central to that. But the virus getting better is a better than 50-50 chance. The economy getting better is a better than 50-50 chance. And Trump being indicted is clearly a better than 50-50 chance. And what I did not know that I read today was there's a Justice Department investigation into Trump's threatening people about election law. I did not realize that until I read that today, that the Justice Department's investigating this along with the Fulton County DA.
Well, I agree with all of the above. And to go back to the Hill, we, I think, correctly fault some Democrats for their behavior, even if they get in line at the end. And I think Nancy Pelosi is the one that's going to pull this through with the help of some. But let's not let the Republicans off the hook. Start with Mitch McConnell, who once again is willing to let the country go into default for his own political gain. He always puts power and money ahead of country. He's done it again. But I also want to ask those Republicans who say, my God, you can't undo the Trump tax cut. That produced the best economy of our lifetime. No, it did not. I am sorry. What it produced was a lot of red ink. James, this may come as a surprise to you. It may not. But the last 7 years of the Clinton administration had faster economic growth than any year during the Trump years. And I want to say finally on the Republicans, Senator Barrasso and Congressman McCarthy, you oppose this Democratic social infrastructure package. Fine, that's what the other party does. But are you opposed to extending the child tax credit that would lower child poverty in this country from 14 to 8? Are you opposed to that? Are you opposed to universal pre-K? Are you opposed to assistance for grossly underpaid home health care workers taking care of seniors with great disabilities or others like that? You opposed to lowering drug prices? Tell us what you're for. You're opposed to the climate change. They're getting away with murder, James. It's one thing to oppose. It's one thing to demagogue and not say what they're for. It really bugs me.
It is. And here's about nothing but power. I would ask the Democrats is to be 75% about power. Right now, many of them are more about Twitter followings than they are about power. And there's a real aversion to power. Take redistricting in Virginia. We turned it over to a blue ribbon committee in the Supreme Court, which has a Republican majority. They could have redistricted if they were done what they're doing in Texas and these other places, or North. They would have redistricted. I think there'd been 2 more Democratic. For sure, you'd have strengthened every Democratic incumbent and probably picked up another seat. There's something about Democrats that makes them adverse to wielding power. That's what it's about. They give a certain amount. The Congress has a certain amount of power. Use it. McConnell does it 100%, and we're out there counting Twitter followers. It's ridiculous. Ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. I have as long as I'm on a tirade, I have one more, and that's on my business, the media. K Street is on a high with these bills, particularly the tax bill, and the media is doing a bad job in telling us who on K Street's doing this. New York Times does a big front page piece the other day. I couldn't wait to read it on the massive lobbying going on. You know what it told me? It told me that Big Pharma and the Chamber of Commerce are opposing these bills. Well, no kidding. I knew that. I want to know, especially, which Democrats are being paid to sandbag their party's priorities. And everybody has the right to lobby. I just want to know who they are. I just want to have some transparency. And that's up to the media to do a much better job.
These people are the equivalent, the political equivalent of traitors, right? I'm not advocating that they be shot, but in terms of their political maneuvering and being part of the Democratic Party, I understand it. You understand this better than me. The federal government is the largest purchaser of prescription drugs in probably the world, all right? They are forbidden to negotiate. So if Hertz goes, I may be bankrupt now, but Hertz or Avis, if they go buy 3,000 cars, they're obviously going to get a discount from Ford.
Right.
Right. And these people, and this is so popular, it's like 75, 80%. And how can you be a fiscal conservative and not say that the federal government should be able to negotiate the price of insulin? It's so offensive that the mind, it just boggles the mind,
right,
just to think of that. And, they had to put that in to get the votes for Obamacare. Well, when you got them in, then go ahead and take it away. But somebody there is going to cocktail parties, is being, hailed as a, K Street Democrat, et cetera, and they're the equivalent of traitors. What are the names?
Exactly. Name the names. Same thing on the tax bill, James. If you talk about the fact that we have too much inequality in this country, we have an unfair tax system, then God damn it, I want to know what lobbyists are up there lobbying to keep the estate tax the way it is now, to keep capital gains the way it is now, to keep capital gains at death the way it is now, to keep the carried interest. I want to know the names. Who are they? They have every right to do it. No one's going to take that away from them. But it ought to be transparent. They ought to be in the front page of the New York Times. I don't need to know about Big Pharma and Chamber of Commerce. I know that already. Everybody knows that. But who are these, and particularly who are the ones that work, that are in that livelihood because of the success they had working for Democrats before? That's what we really need to know.
I don't blame the Russians for paying Always James. I blame Always James. And these, now, of course, it was one of the greatest crimes in history. And I just said, you can't compare anybody to Always James. I'm not. But in terms of politics, he was a traitor to his country. And if you're a Democrat and you're doing this, you're just a traitor for money. That's all there is to it.
Well, we're right. Name names. Come on, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, all the other, CNN, name names. That's all.
We'll know 75% of them, I promise you.
Right, but we ought to see them in print, and maybe they'll be shamed. Maybe they won't. Maybe the money's so big it doesn't matter.
They won't like it, because their spouses will be serving on a charter school board.
Right, make them uncomfortable. The role of journalism is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. Let's do some affliction.
Right. I had the same reaction at Times Story you did. I said, oh, man, it's going to be, let's get to the details. And I kept looking. Well, I didn't learn a fucking thing.
Yeah, no, it's true. James, you mentioned Terry McAuliffe a minute ago. That's a must-win race for Democrats, for Terry, for Virginians, but it looks awfully tight right now.
Well, let's start with one thing we know for sure. If Terry wouldn't be running, we wouldn't have a chance. If we had some delegate such and such, we wouldn't have a chance. And as much as anything, he's tied to the Congress getting a deal. Biden's very unfavorable in Virginia, is up 10 points. That's not good, because that means that the enthusiasm is there. Now, on the plus side, he's not being outspent at all. If anything, he's spending more. The absentee request and that kind of stuff looks good. I mean, you're not seeing it in the early, to start already started voting. It looks kind of like you wanted to. But if they don't. If they get a deal, Terry is the favorite. If they don't, he's the underdog. That's how important this is.
Well, just a word about his opponent, the private equity guy, former private equity guy, Glenn Youngkin. He's doing exactly what we thought he'd do. Now he's playing the race card. He's playing the race card by talking about critical race theory being taught in the Virginia schools. Of course, it's not. That's his racial dog whistle. And he's also playing the Trump card. He's saying, let's audit all of the voting machines. Why, Mr. Youngkin? Why do we have to audit all the voting machines? I don't really care if you do that, but that's just pandering to Trump. He's trying to pretend that he's really a different Republican than Trump, but he's really in the tank to Trump. He is a very wealthy guy with no principles, little regard for the truth. But James, unfortunately, it is working fairly well so far.
Yeah, look, there's a good Lincoln Project negative on Youngkin, and it has and talking about he doesn't believe in mass mandates, and it points out that his children go to Georgetown Day. Well, of course, at Georgetown Day. What do they have?
Right.
Same thing they got at Sidwell, okay? Or same thing they got at Episcopal, anything else.
We elitists stick together.
Yeah. And his children are not going anywhere without a mask. But your children, if you're a child out in the Shenandoah Valley going to public school, no, he don't care. Then they have good negatives on him, and they just got to drive him home. He doesn't do any press events. He does 5 events a week, but they monitor him pretty close, and he says some really contradictory things on right-wing talk radio. And, and there's more good stuff coming. Youngkin, if I were you, I would be very nervous because there are a lot of people that are out there that let's put it this way. As Stalin once said, if you're afraid of wolves, don't go in the woods.
Or as Joe Lewis said, you can run, but you can't hide. So we'll see if that happens between now and November 2nd. Okay. All right, James, this is going to build on something you've been talking about today and for a while. It's from Ruth in Chicago. She said, that the Democrats were as ruthless, organized, and committed to building and maintaining power as right-wing Republicans are. Where's our Roy Cohn? Go ahead, James.
Okay, first of all, we couldn't have a Roy Cohn because Democratic voters wouldn't stand for it. Our voters just don't give us the sufficient permission to do that. And by the way, I kind of like that. But because you can't be Roy Cohn, that does not mean that you can't be Harry Reid. All right? You got to understand that. And if we had more Harry Reid in us, we'd be a hell of a lot better off. Or we had more George Mitchell or more Nancy Pelosi in us. I mean, we have some tough people that in the modern Democratic Party. The problem is the Twitter people and the purists get in the way of getting anything done, and that's the primary issue that we have. And by the way, I go back. The press, their voters don't care, and the press they love finding Democrats in disarray. But on the other hand, et cetera, et cetera. One party is at its core, I think, evil. And the other party is at its core dysfunctional. Well, once you've decided that you could go down the track of evilness, and I think the Trump stuff is evil. I think the way they did a tax code is evil on earth. I really do. I mean, it's not a difference of opinion. It's ridiculous. But if you can fight it with toughness. No one's asking Democrats to go out and lie. As Harry Truman said, I just tell the truth about it. Give them hell, and we got to speak more clearly with one voice. And people have to subjugate their own fundraising ambitions or own cable TV appearances for the country. Everybody's got to wake up one day here, and it's got to be in the month of October, and say, I'm American first, and I'm blank second, and let's just get this deal done. What are we waiting on?
That's for sure, and I hope it doesn't take till the end of the month. Eric in Rhode Island, this is a question addressed to both of us, same sort of question. Eric wants to know, why so hard to cover this Democratic battle over the infrastructure and spending bills without injecting one's point of view? From the press coverage, he's saying, you're right, either it's liberals endanger the prospect of passing a bill or Senator Manchin and Sinema jeopardize Biden's economic plans. Why do you have to always put that kind of spin on it? I don't think that's the main problem with the press coverage. I think the main problem is in part caused by the participants, the focus not on what's in the bill, but on the supposed size of the bill. And secondly, as James and I have talked about on this show, including today, let's find out who the special interests are involved in it. I think some of the coverage has been good, some of it has been not so good. James, Eric wants to know also, from your point of view, is this what political operatives want? Do they want to make it an ideological war?
Well, I don't. What a political operative wants to know is what I want is I want to tell people what's in the thing. All right, because if you poll the components of it, it's 80%. I don't have to tell you how popular controlling prescription drug, negotiating prescription drug prices are. Common sense will tell you that, right? And no one is asking somebody to have a great deal of political courage. And if you go back, there was a very interesting Paul Krugman column where in 2011 the press basically said they have to get a grand deal to cut entitlements, right? That was just the gift. That was the position. Oh yeah, they got to do that. Of course. It was this and that. And of course now, the last thing anybody's going to do is talk about that. And so when you have kind of orthodoxy and everybody talks to everybody else and everybody thinks the same way, you're going to end up with the same stories over and over and over again. And the only way that you can get them off of that crack is by intervening hard. And, Biden, I don't think he picks up the phone and calls. I'd be for I would do Mario Cuomo used to do, call up the reporters and say, look, this is what you're not reporting. This is what we've been saying. And they hadn't done a good job of, it's more their fault than the press on this, but everybody's got to do a better job of this and quit obsessing on a number.
Right. It's what's in the bill that counts. John in Hallstatt, Minnesota, wants to know, James, can you provide a lens into the political thinking behind those who throw up so many obstacles to defeating the COVID crisis? As destructive as their policies are, they must think there's a political upside, right? What are they up to? Why? What's the explanation?
There's a Tom Etzel, as usual, has a really illuminating piece here. And it is a commentary on modern American politics that people are literally willing to die because they want to own the live so bad. And Etzel and people point out is that it's the kind of way to come off. It's hubris, like when your party's like, if you're too stupid to see this. And it has just gotten out of control and to the point where if, like people say they believe in creationism. Well, I don't know if they really believe in creationism. They just hate the people that tell them you can't believe in it. Right. Yeah. And I see Hugh Hewitt saying it's time for Fauci to, but Fauci's, of course, he's just become a symbol of, and he's the most non-hubristic person I've ever seen in my life. He's an Italian kid that grew up on top of a drugstore, and took the subway to high school. But they have branded him, in I guess successfully, but he doesn't even remotely come across like that. I think this guy that just resigned from NIH, Dr. Collins, is another really top guy.
Sure is.
He's been there forever, and he says I'm somebody else. But I think he's a highly talented public servant. There's a lot of integrity, and he's not a hubristic person either. But man, there's something that people have done. Look, if you look at, I'll just take a minute to make another point. Look at Brexit. The United Kingdom, a majority of the people said, let's just commit suicide. And we'll get we'll show the City of London guys, that's their Wall Street, who runs this country. And now that they're not going to have gas for heating, they're going to have a crisis. Read Tom Friedman this morning. They don't have any truck drivers. They kicked all the truck drivers out of the country.
Right.
Democracy doesn't work when people are not looking after their self-interest. What they're doing is they hate the other side so much they're willing to forego their self-interest to hurt the other side. That's what's happening, and that's exactly what's happening in COVID.
Right.
And
exactly. It's a common occurrence too, James. The people who have been, who have voted for politicians in those 12 states that have refused Medicaid expansion, largely are working class people in communities that are losing hospitals, that have poor people that aren't being covered by Medicaid. They're voting against their self-interest because they are voting against what they perceive as the elite liberals.
Right.
And the elite liberals deserve some of the blame, to be sure, but mainly they have been, to coin an old phrase I first heard from George Romney, Mitt Romney's father, years ago, they've been brainwashed.
There's a good piece in Slate by a journalist named Rebecca Onion. She's quite good. You can look her up. I think she's got like a PhD in history. And this woman from Arkansas, an academic, wrote a book. Reading the thing, it looks like it's pretty good. And she said the messaging on vaccines to them should be, you were right, right at the beginning, but now that the Delta variant's here, it's better for you to take it. In other words, just don't argue that what you want to say is, you stupid son of a bitch, how can you be so goddamn ignorant to not be vaccinated? Say, you made a choice. I could understand that, but now you have to rethink your choice because we've interjected it as a new player in the game. I don't think it'll work, but it's probably the best idea I've heard so far.
Well, and always use the term requirement, not mandate. It does make a difference. Even some smart politicians sometimes fall into that trap. It's the same thing. But we don't, we don't talk about mumps mandates. We talk about requirements for a mump shot. So it's, anyway. John in Sea Ranch, California, back to our old friend McConnell, wants to know, is McConnell using the destiny to tie up the Senate floor so they can't get to voting rights and other important bills? Sure he is. Of course he is. He's doing it to create chaos. He's doing it if he has to screw the country to do it. In order to screw the Democrats, he'll do it. That's what Mitch McConnell always does. I used to have arguments with people say, McConnell's a very conservative guy, but he's an institutionalist. He's like Howard Baker and Bob Dole. He really cares about the Senate. That's bullshit. He is into power and money, and if he can screw up everything, he'll do it.
Yeah. McConnell, as if he cares about the country.
Right.
Come on.
Anyway.
And again, there's no, I don't know if they don't give the votes, then the United States, they're going to print that $1 trillion coin, which seems like a pretty good idea. I'd like to see them go ahead and do it. And it looks like it's pretty constitutionally sound.
Francis in Pensacola, Florida, James. This is just, once again, James, they're writing them to you. She said, I lived in New Orleans for 5 years, but I had to move. I miss it every day. Can you tell me if you think the mayor and the parish presidents did a good job of steering the area through the pandemic and the recent storm?
Well, first of all, my friend in Sea Ranch, I'm pretty sure that's in North San Diego County, which is one of the best places in the entire United States.
Right. Francis in Pensacola.
I know, I'm getting to Escambia County, Florida.
Yeah.
The truth of the matter is some of the parish presidents did a good job. I do not think the mayor of New Orleans has done a good job at all. In fact, I think it's borderline catastrophic. I mean, Lafayette Square is block from where I live, and I was running in it, and that's the center of the city. Gallia Hall is the old city hall. It's where Zulu and Rex, the mayor toast them. It's one of the most famous buildings in the city. They have not emptied the trash cans yet. And that storm was a long, long time ago. So I'm very, and the mayor's like arguing with people in bars about calling their names and that kind of stuff. But I hope she gets better because it's not very good. I got to tell you.
I agree. Brian in Port Washington and New York says, on the occasion of Jimmy Carter's 97th birthday, happy birthday, Mr. President, he was the first president I ever voted for. This was Brian. What are your recollections of the man as a new Southern politician, a president, and very active former president, particularly on elections and human rights? I think Jimmy Carter may be the best ex-president America has ever had. He has done more good work and the last, whatever it's been, 40 years, it's unimaginable. Going around to the continent of Africa, building homes. He's been a great ex-president. He wasn't a great president. He was a better president than was thought when he left. He certainly put human rights, global human rights, on the map. He was the first president to talk really seriously about energy conservation and alternatives. And the Camp David Accords were one of the more important Middle East pacts we've ever had. There were flaws. He wasn't very good working with Congress, and he had some bad fortune, a bad economy. But Jimmy Carter is a great ex-president, and he's been a real important figure in America.
You know, there's a little bit also, remember, he was a Democratic president. Remember airline deregulation,
right.
Trucking deregulation? I mean, you couldn't have competed anywhere in the world. He actually did it. He did it.
Yep.
And the
Panama Canal treaties, too.
Yeah, the Panama Canal Treaty. Could you imagine what happened with it? Huge success. He did, the military buildup, he actually started it. It started under President Carter. I think that people had made a judgment about him and are reluctant to change it. I actually, if you look back in his terms of his 4 years, they certainly look, as time moves on, it's like President Bush 41, 4-year term. As time moves on, the record tends to look better. And I think, the Panama Canal Treaty, that was like, it would have been a disaster if we wouldn't have done that.
Right.
So, and
well,
it was risky.
Two good books on your point, James, on Carter, by Kai Bird and by Jonathan Alder, I think have really done a very good job of revisiting achievements and legacy that were certainly a lot better than we thought in 1981.
Yeah.
Our final question is from Mike in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I love the geographical range of our questioners today. And he said, we know the Democrats need Joe Manchin in the Senate right now, but what happens if Democrats pick up seats in the Senate and hold the House in 2022? Does Schumer completely drop acquiescing to Manchin?
Well, first of all, when you got 50, if you need 50 plus the vice president, that you're running into math. And by the way, I think Manchin is much. I think he is a Roman Catholic Italian Democrat in West Virginia. All right, that's just an entirely different cut of cloth than most people in the Democratic Party. If we didn't have Joe Manchin, we'd have Marsha Blackman.
Oh my God.
It's not the choice. You get Joe Manchin, you get Elizabeth Warren. All right? And I don't know what these people are thinking about. People are much more concerned about Senator Sinema, although I don't think people showing up and being rude to her is the most effective lobbying tactic I've ever seen in my life.
It's stupid, just stupid.
Yeah, is it? And I don't think that the progressives. I don't think Joe Manchin is worried about the progressive primary, getting primaried by some Brooklyn progressive, okay? I don't think that's a problem at all. But if they remember that they all have an interest in power, and this really would help the country, then we got to get this thing rolling, big time.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, please keep those questions coming in. We love them. We hate the fact we can't get to everyone, but we'll try to get to some of the ones we didn't use this week. We'll try to get to them next week. So you know where to send them. Please keep them coming. Hey, James, my grandson Kai deserves the best when it comes to cereal, and he knows what it is. But let's make it a populist movement. Because we all know, we all love our favorite snack breakfast and all-around delicious treat, Magic Spoon. Magic Spoon has 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and only 4 net grams of carbs in each serving. It's only 140 calories per serving. It's keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, and low-carb. You can build your own box and customize it to make your own custom bundle with Magic Spoon's delicious cocoa, fruity, frosted, my favorite, peanut butter, blueberry, Kai's favorite, or cinnamon flavors. But that's not all. Great news, James, for you and our audience. Magic Spoon is bringing back 2 super popular flavors, cookies and cream and maple waffle, permanently. So make sure you try them. Cookies and cream and maple waffle. They're delicious, indulgent, and healthy. James, you're in.
Well, I am too. And the thing about Magic Spoon, I like it better as a snack food than a breakfast food, actually. I mean, it's not while I'm sitting on my computer, I'm doing things as opposed to having, Cheetos in it. I put the cereal in it and just pop it in my mouth. And you know what? I'm not only I'm not doing any harm to my body, I'm doing a lot of good for it. Right. And it tastes good. I think its utility goes way beyond the breakfast table.
Boy, it is good. It is good. Go to magicspoon.com/war room to grab a custom bundle of cereal and try it today. And be sure to use our promo code WARROOM at checkout to save $5 off your order. Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it, for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, get your next delicious bowl of guilt-free cereal at magicspoon.com/war room and use the code WARROOM to save $5 off. Thank you, Magic Spoon, for sponsoring this episode. Hey, James, this is Rip and Read, the Pandora Papers, confidential papers obtained by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists and published by the Washington Post, revealing scams called offshore accounts or trust to shelter income, avoiding any transparency in taxes. The perpetrators included heads of states from Jordan's King Abdullah to the Czech Prime Minister to Russia's Vladimir Putin, who secretly got a condo for his girlfriend using one of these secretive trusts. They include a rich Colombian laundering money from drug profits, other magnates exploiting workers used to hide and avoid child support payments in some cases that hurt kids. They've been caught offshore, but they are also set up in several American states, South Dakota, Delaware, Alaska. Now, there's a need for some kind of global reaction here, global cooperation. We're working on a minimum tax. That'll help a little bit, but you got to close down these scams. And there is no reason to wait in places like South Dakota to shut down this scam for the shady rich. And that's all it is.
Yeah, it's really unbelievable. In South Dakota, I wonder if people they're hardworking people there. That's not the easiest place in the world to live. I wonder if they know what's going on in their own state.
Yeah, I don't know if they do.
Mine is Chief Justice Roberts in Shelby County. The Shelby County versus Holder case said there wasn't any need to have voting rights because there wasn't any racism left in America. Well, let me turn your attention to Martha Huckabee, who was the leader of the National Federation of Republican Women in Louisiana. Her claims on social media that slavery resulted in hardworking ethics and love and respect between enslaved people and slave owners. And she vigorously defended State Representative Jimmy Garofalo from St. Bernard Parish, who was the chairman of the House Education Committee. Understand, he was the chairman of the Louisiana House Education Committee, and he said that the suggestion of schools is they teach the good, the bad, the ugly of slavery. So they want to teach the good of slavery. And this was what slavery was. It was actually good. And these are not bit players in the Republican Party, by the way. So I don't know how to tell you this, Justice Roberts, but you ought to come down here and spend a half a day with me, and I could show you enough racism to last you for the rest of your life and everybody else's. I guarantee you.
Hey, James, I got an idea. How about if Martha and Jimmy, they think it was so good, how about they volunteer, maybe just for 6 months, not even 12 years, for 6 months to be a slave, okay?
No,
come on, Martha and Jimmy, come on in.
By the way, the best slave museum is 40 miles from New Orleans. Yeah. The Whitney Plantation, that place is remarkable. Yeah, and I guarantee you that people are telling them, well, you didn't say anything wrong. What's wrong with that? Of course that was the way it is. I mean, that people believe that shit. And They both, they were both, elected to their positions. It's unfreaking believable.
I'll tell you something. If there is a James Carville hosting John Roberts in a tour of Louisiana, man, I want to cover that. I'll be there, James.
You want to see some racism? Come sit.
Okay.
Let's go. The other thing, Al, is that some of this stuff that I'm not a big fan of some of the stuff in the 1619 Project, but my point is, there's so goddamn much racism in our history, you don't need to make any up.
Right.
There's sufficient amount out there to cover. You could have a million scholars working $1 million each, and you wouldn't unearth all of it.
As you know, I just got back this week from a wonderful, marvelous tour, about my 5th or 6th of the Gettysburg battlefield. And when you look at that, there was only one reason that battle took place. There was only one reason that war took place, and that was slavery. And that's a stain that we just have to acknowledge.
And never forget that Lee's army captured free blacks in Pennsylvania and sold them into slavery.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Confiscated these people's goods. But let's put it this way. They were better than Sherman. They actually paid for it. They gave them Confederate money.
Yeah. You know how much that was worth.
Sherman should have gotten some Confederate money and given it to
Exactly. Huh? Yeah. I tell you, that's like that bridge to nowhere in Alaska.
Right. So I just got to point that out about the sainted General Lee.
But anybody out there, I know James loves this too. If if you're starting to travel now and you live anywhere near or you're on the East Coast, man, go to Gettysburg. There is no more sacred ground in America than that battlefield and that cemetery. It's a wonderful experience. Hey, thanks for listening to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. Don't forget to send your questions for us by email to politicswarroom@gmail.com or tweet them for next week's show at Politicon. Following this episode, we'd appreciate it if you'd check out the link to our sponsor, Magic Spoon, in the show notes. We really thank you for supporting them. When you do, it helps make this podcast happen. To keep up with us, subscribe to Politics War Room on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen. Please rate the show with a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with another show as we continue our War Room planning.